हाय, मैं हूं अपूर्वा शेठ और मैं स्वागत करता हूं आपका द राइट चॉइसेस विद ओरेकल्स ऑफ दलाल स्ट्रीट के 88वें एपिसोड पे। अगर आप हमारा ये शो पहली बार देख रहे हो तो हमारी चैनल को जरूर सब्सक्राइब करें ताकि आप एक बेहतर ट्रेडर और इन्वेस्टर बन सके। लगभग 1.5 साल से हम हर शनिवार सुबह 11 बजे एक इंसाइटफुल एपिसोड लेके आते हैं जहां हम मार्केट एक्सपर्ट से एक्शनेबल और इंसाइटफुल स्ट्रेटजीज लेके आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करते हैं। आज के हमारे जो गेस्ट है उनसे आप पहले भी मिल चुके हो हमारे शो पे। पिछली बार इनके साथ जो हमने डिस्कशन किया था उसमें हमने देखा था कि कैसे आप सिंपल प्राइस और वॉल्यूम एक्शन लेकर के अच्छे स्टॉक्स आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हो जो कि आपको फिनोमिनल रिटर्न्स दे सकते हैं। आज के हमारे एपिसोड में हम इनके साथ एक और नई स्ट्रेटजी डिस्कस करेंगे जो कि पर्सनली मुझे भी बहुत पसंद है। ये पिछले 15 साल से मार्केट्स में एक्टिव है। इन्होंने 300 से भी ज्यादा टेक्निकल एनालिसिस की वर्कशॉप्स की है और ये लगभग आए दिन टीवी पे आपको दिखी जाएंगे। तो इनके व्यूज और इनके चार्ट्स दोनों ही बहुत ही अच्छे और इंसाइटफुल होते हैं। तो आज हम इनसे बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग स्ट्रैटेजी सीखने वाले हैं। तो चलिए बुलाते हैं नूरेश मेरानी जी को। Muresh, welcome to our show.
Hi.
We are pleased to have you again. एंड जो पिछली बार हमने जो स्ट्रैटेजी डिस्कस की थी, आई एम श्योर बहुत सारे लोगों को पसंद आई थी। उसके ऊपर हमने स्क्रीनर भी बनाया था और मुझे आज भी लोग मिलते हैं और बोलते हैं कि वो स्क्रीनर्स और वो जो स्ट्रैटेजी है वो काफी काम की है एंड इट इज वेरी सिंपल। तो आज भी हम एक ऐसी सिंपल स्ट्रैटेजी देखेंगे, आप हमें बताने वाले हो। तो आई एम वेरी क्यूरियस एंड एक्साइटेड टू लर्न फ्रॉम यू।
आज जो स्ट्रैटेजी जो मैं ले रहा हूँ वो एक मिक्सचर है। एक तो टेक्निकल एनालिसिस प्लस थोड़ा ऑल्टरनेटिव रिसर्च टाइप का, जैसे हम इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग जो डेटा को लेकर है। बेसिकली यहाँ पे एक मिक्सचर है, क्योंकि एक मानना यह है कि इंडिया में कंपनीज जो भी हो, प्रमोटर्स पे एम्फोसिस बहुत ज्यादा है। और जो इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग है जनरली से अगर हम देखें, अगर एक कंपनी का मार्केट कैप 1000 करोड़ हो और प्रमोटर अगर उसमें 20 करोड़ रुपए डाल रहा है एज से बाइंग ओपन मार्केट से, तो 20 करोड़ का अगर एक नंबर है जस्ट 2% ऑफ इक्विटी, बट इन टर्म्स ऑफ कैश फ्लो काफी बड़ा होता है। कि जैसे एक सिंपल एग्जांपल है कि कोई भी कंपनी ले लो इंडिया में, सबसे ज्यादा सैलरी पे आउट कितना है, तो एक मीडिया कंपनी के सीईओ का कुछ 80 करोड़ का, बट मोस्ट पे आउट्स आर रफली 5 करोड़ टू 10 करोड़ मैक्सिमम। So as an individual promoter के पास cash flow is limited through dividends and the salary, और उसके बाद taxation भी है। जब अगर वो पैसा डालता है और जब इन्वेस्टमेंट किया जाता है स्टॉक में, एंट्री इज इजी, एग्जिट इज डिफिकल्ट। क्योंकि जब आप एग्जिट करोगे तो मार्केट टेक्स इट वेरी वेरी नेगेटिवली। वी हैव सीन दैट कि काफी कंपनीज में वो काफी नेगेटिवली लिया जाता है। आज भी अगर हम देखें तो न्यू एज कंपनीज में जब जब प्रमोटर्स ने बेचा है या से एम्प्लॉइज ने बेचा, इट हैज बीन टेकन मोर नेगेटिवली। एग्जिट इज डिफिकल्ट, एंट्री इज समथिंग कि अगर एंट्री ले लिया तो उसके बाद एग्जिट विल बी डिफिकल्ट। एसेंशियली जब तक देयर आर हायर चांसेस, द प्रमोटर एक्सपेक्ट्स के एट करंट प्राइसेस होपफुली देयर इज वैल्यू इन द स्टॉक एंड इवेंचुअली इट्स अ लॉन्ग टर्म एंट्री। एंड उसके बाद ये सब लॉजिक्स के बाद भी हम यूज करेंगे टेक्निकल्स टू एक्चुअली टेक द स्ट्रेटेजी फॉरवर्ड, सो दैट विल रिड्यूस द रिस्क एंड टाइमिंग एलिमेंट आ जाएगा इसमें।
श्योर, एब्सोल्युटली। तो ये पीटर लिंच की बुक में मैंने एक काफी अच्छी इंटरेस्टिंग लाइन पढ़ी थी कि प्रमोटर्स के पास बेचने के लिए 1000 रीजंस हो सकते हैं, लेकिन खरीदने का सिर्फ एक ही रीजन है कि ही इज बुलिश ऑन द स्टॉक एंड ही इज बुलिश ऑन हिज ओन कंपनी। तो प्रमोटर्स जब खुद बाय कर रहा है तो उनको बाकी सब लोगों से बहुत ज्यादा पता होता है। तो आई एम श्योर कि आज हम आपसे भी इसी से रिलेटेड एक्चुअली प्रैक्टिकली कैसे ये सब चीजें करें ये सीखेंगे। तो एक्साइटेड टू लर्न फ्रॉम यू।
जैसे अभी आपने ये कहा, तो उसमें एग्जैक्टली कुछ साल पहले एक कंपनी जो चली थी ग्राफाइट इलेक्ट्रोड्स में, हेग, प्रमोटर्स और बाइंग, और उनको कॉन कॉल में पूछा गया तो उन्होंने भी कुछ सिमिलर जवाब दिया था कि आप लोग क्यों शेयर खरीदते हो, मैंने भी कुछ उसी लिए खरीदा टाइम। सो इट वाज वेरी सिमिलर टू व्हाट इट इज देयर। तो दैट वाज द ओनली टाइम अ प्रमोटर मेंशंस कि हाँ भाई दिस आर द रीजंस टू बाय, अदरवाइज दे आर नॉट सपोज्ड टू गिव एनी रीजंस। बट जब कॉन कॉल में पूछा था तो काफी सिमिलर आंसर। और उसके बाद यही स्टॉक was a 5x or a 10x, and then dividend was equal to almost the starting price.
Cool. Let's begin then.
So काफी points जो इसमें cover की गई है वो related to insider trading है plus technical. So there are two parts to it. तो सबसे पहले समझते हैं insider trading होता क्या है. So insider trading, it's a good way to earn for companies to research. Now the problem is if you look at the whole universe of companies in India, NSE has roughly around 1500 to 1800 companies which trade on a daily basis. BSE has 2500 to 3000 companies. We keep listening कि 5000 कंपनीज है, 5000 कंपनीज डेली ट्रेड नहीं होती, काफी कंपनीज सस्पेंड हो चुकी है, और ये जो 2500 कंपनीज भी है, 2500 कंपनी बीएससी, उसमें से काफी कंपनीज जो है सब 20 करोड़ मार्केट कैप है, 50-100 करोड़ मार्केट कैप है. तो एसेंशियली अगर हम इतना भी समझ लेंगे, अगर एनएससी जितना यूनिवर्स है तो 1500 कंपनीज है आपके पास ट्रैक करने को. प्रॉब्लम ये है कि वेयर टू कम डाउन टू कि कौन सी कंपनीज रिसर्च करनी है. हर किसी का एक लिमिटेशन है. कितनी कंपनीज देख लोगे, कितने सेक्टर्स देख लोगे. सो इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग से एक डेटा मिलता है कि जहां पे एक स्मॉल कैप्स का एक यूनिवर्स है, जहां पे एक कंपनीज मिल जाती है जहां पे रिसर्च करना. नाउ इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग विल नॉट बी एज ह्यूज इन अ लार्ज कैप, राइट. सो जैसे अगर लार्ज कैप में इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग अनाउंसमेंट्स देखोगे तो वो खाली ईसॉप्स के होंगे, बट लार्ज कैप्स से ज्यादा मिड कैप और स्मॉल कैप में दिखाई देता है. काफी रेयर केसेस होते हैं जब लार्ज कैप में इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग डिस्क्लोजर्स एज अ मीनिंगफुल वे हो. So it becomes easier कि आपने ये criteria से it gives you a range of good companies to look at, research, and then decide. So what does insider trading mean? So it means trading in shares of the companies by the persons who are in the management or those who have unpublished price sensitive information. Basically, someone, अगर simple way में देखें तो someone who knows more about the company than we do. And this is regulated by SEBI, और ये disclosures on a daily basis आ जाते हैं, और एक time limit है जिसके बीच में promoters have to disclose it to the exchange. Now, why do we look at insider buying? Right? More so focused on the insider buying, less focused on the insider selling. We'll look at insider selling भी कैसे देखनी है, but why look at insider buying? Now, सबसे बड़ी बात अगर देखें तो इंडिया में the holding structure of companies in India is very different from what it is in the world. For example, in global markets, 70% of the number of shares available is in the market and promoters own 30% roughly, or even lower. But in India, it is the other way around. In a lot of small cap and mid cap companies, promoters own 50 to 75% stake. Almost a decade back, SEBI had to come out with the rule saying you have to go to 75%. Right? Even today, when an IPO comes in, the promoters own 80-90%, and then it has to be reduced over a period of time. So essentially, you would say I would be buying a lot more shares of my own company so that I can't be taken over in the world, right? कि जैसे एलोन मस्क ने ट्विटर को टेक ओवर कर लिया, right? तो ये सिनेरियो इंडिया में है नहीं, क्योंकि majority of the places promoters own more than 50%. So promoters buying to save themselves from a takeover is not happening, कि वो reason है नहीं, which is generally a major reason where you want to increase stake. And also the fact governance is pretty low in India relative to the world. So a promoter may own 50% of the company, but has access to 100% of it. And they can siphon off funds and all take benefits from the listed entity, even if they own only 50%. Right? ऐसा नहीं है कि promoter ने कुछ गफला किया और आप उन पे जाके केस कर सकते हो इंडिया में. So those are not the reasons to there. So management control is there. Plus there is no risk of hostile takeover. So why would a promoter buy? Right? 50% हो या 60% हो या 40% हो, promoter का control 100% पर. So there could be few reasons. Now this is hypothetical in nature, but this could be a few reasons. One could be unofficial to official holding, which is the negative part, which is basically you're owning shares in some relatives account, some vendors account, etc. That you are now buying into your own account. Then second would be giving exit to family members, funds, PE, etc. ये काफी बार होता है कि काफी cases में PEs have a 8-9 year period and they have to sell after their holding period, and the promoter ends up buying. At times there are a lot of inheritance issues. So in India, because the next generation comes in, the shareholding could be split into various cases. So it could also be giving exit to family members. Next one is market signaling. So when you will see many a times कि जब भी एक bad news आती है, you will see very small quantities being bought by the promoters, which may not be very relevant. But this is also to market signal. So for example, very recently, there was some bad news on Hero MotoCorp. And in that week, promoters bought some stake from the market. Now that can be something which is only for signaling, but there can be more reasons too. Multiple reasons, but one of the major reasons is whatever is being done, you can buy easily, you can't sell off easily. So a promoter trading in its own company will be taken very, very negatively by the market. You want the promoter के भाई promoter ने आपका धंधा करना है, stock में up and down में उनको participate नहीं करना है, right? So it's a one-way road essentially. So buying from the open market is generally seen as a good sign, but selling by the promoters is not generally taken well by the markets, right? Selling even a small percentage of shares by insiders is taken negatively, more so in a sideways and a falling market. It's not necessary, but it is generally taken negatively. Questions are asked, why are you selling, etc. Why is it a one-way road? We very rarely see promoters trade in and out of the company. Now, when I say a one-way road is because you've put the money, right? Say a lot of companies have fallen in 2020. We actually saw the bunch of insider trading disclosures come in March into April. Now, the promoters have bought. Now, you can't expect that the stock goes up 20% higher and they will sell. It is very rare to see that sort of actions happening from the promoters. So it's not a they can trade in and trade out because there was an opportunity of undervalued stock price. So it is more so a long-term money which is parked. And when we look at it in terms of कि promoter ने पैसा लगाया, but उनके पास पैसा कितना है, right? Market cap is very different from cash flow. All right. See, अगर एक company देखे, अगर market cap 1,000 crore है, right? Cash flow will not be 200 crores, right? So the promoter may not have anything else which has such value. So essentially, in a lot of cases, all the value of the promoter, the net worth of the promoter is with the market cap of the company. The cash flow would be low. Now, so market cap can be thousands of crores, but the cash flow is very low. Because cash flow कहाँ से आता है company के promoters को? One is dividend yield. Now, we've seen across the board, dividend yields are not more than 2 to 5%. Now, the salary could be the next flow to the promoters. Now, the salary range could be 0 to 100 crores. Mukesh Ambani takes maybe 1 rupee. And there is a Sun TV which takes 87 crores. But essentially, this is the maximum of cash flow that the promoter can get. If you were to take the last year, 10 years of salary plus dividends, it will still be a smaller fraction of the market cap. All right. So what happens is कि अगर हम देखें कि company का market cap 100 है, but promoters may not have 20 rupees of cash. They may have 2, 5, 10, 20 rupees of net worth beyond the listed entity, unless they are into various other businesses. Now, so when a promoter buys a significant percentage of the company, a lot of personal cash flow has been invested, and this is possibly with a longer term duration. So that is generally a very good signal कि a quantum of money invested by the promoter. Now, how do we look at this? कि ये तो समझ गया promoter ने buying की, it's a one-way road, etc. But how do we look at it in terms of कि is this very relevant? So we look at it in two manners. One is absolute value of buying, right? Say a large cap company buying 1 crore worth of shares, say 5 crores or 10 crores worth of shares will not have a very impactful meaning. कि अगर 10,000 crore की company में 10 crore का buying किया promoter ने is nothing. But the same thing happening in a 500 crore market cap company implies 2% of equity has been bought, right? So absolute value of buying in connection with the market cap is what we have to look at it. And at times, say even if it's a 5,000 crore market cap company, 50 crores have been bought. It may not be a very large chunk as equivalent to something, but 50 crores as a value is very important. Same way, in a 100 crore market cap company, you see promoters buying 1% stake, right? The absolute value is only 1 crore, right? So it may not be as important. So you look at absolute value of equity bought, value kitna purchase ka, second percentage of equity bought kitna. So these are the two ways we do a filter to come out with it. So let us take examples, then you will understand how we've seen this. So over the last 10-15 years, जब से मैं ये data देख रहा हूँ, there were two significant periods where promoter buying increased in their stocks. So the first one is in 2011 to 2013. Now this was a period of time where small caps had corrected from 2008 to 2013. In 2013, the small cap index was back at the place where it was in 2011. And the index was down 45-60%. The valuations were terribly low. The next one was in 2020. Now, what was interesting is in March 2020, when we were struggling to buy groceries, there were promoters buying shares in their companies from the open market, right? Because the stock prices had fallen in the end of March. Now, imagine generally what we see, March end is supposed to be a tough period for businesses because March ending, you have to focus a lot more on the business. Then you have COVID. And in that period of time, you see promoters are buying shares. And at that point of time, they did not need to do any signaling because the whole world was in a question mark. It was kal kya hoga, COVID ka implications kya. But we saw maximum buying in March 2020 onwards in that period. So one more criteria which we look at it is when we see a lot of buying happening across various companies, that tells you valuations are interesting. So that was last in 2011 to 13. Now look at some companies. So the oldest example I remember is back in 2009, where it was Supreme Industries. At the peak of the financial crisis in end of 2008 to March 2009, the company gave out a dividend. They came out of the open market buyback. And the stock was at 20x over the next few years. And it has still been one of the best performing companies. The stock used to quote at 7% yields and 5-6 P's, etc. And promoters did an open market buyback. Then Aarti Industries, the promoters bought 5% of equity between 2011 to 2013. CEAT Limited, which is the RPG group, they bought almost 5% of equity between 2011 to 2014 in CEAT. At a price of say 100 rupees, the stock went to 1500. RPG Life Sciences, another group company, promoters bought almost 3 to 4% of equity in 2012 to 14. You can look back into a history of Atul Limited, promoters were buying from the open market. And there are various such companies where you will see promoters have bought at nice prices. We'll see some recent examples also. And many of these companies ended up being multi-baggers also. And at the starting point, they were pretty cheap. So let us take an example of Aarti Industries. Now, this is the same company which in 2007 had done a preferential warrants to themselves. And they forfeited the warrants because in 2008, the prices fell, right? See, because in warrants, you need to only pay up 10% of the total shares to be bought. And the stock was down 30-40%. So it was better off to forfeit it than to say the stock price is at 100 and the promoters buying at 180 is not logical. And they forfeited it. But ideally, they should be buyers. There was only one mutual fund holding the company for 2 decades with no returns. It had a subsidiary in the same line of business, which used to do 30% of revenues. But promoters had more than 50% stake in the core. So they had roughly 75%. 50% was from the listed entity and another 50% of the stake, the residual stake was in personal promoter's name. Now, even though the company was at high debts, they kept on paying dividends. So the business feedback was nice, but there were concerns in terms of the governance of the company. Now see what thing changes. The stock was at 4% yield and a multiple of 6 times. And I think today it quotes at a higher multiple of sales in those times. So that is the kind of change that has happened. So if you look at this period, they used to own roughly around 47% in 2009 and 44% in 2008. Now, warrants converted in 2009, December, then again, a new set of warrants came in 2009. They converted it at a price of 58, bringing more cash into the company. The stock stayed at 50, 60 for a long period of time. Dividends continued. Now, the big trigger which came in after they kept on increasing stake is, I had this company called Anushakti Chemicals. Now, this company used to quote at a P, they converted this company. So they bought over the company, as in basically merged it into the listed entity at a PE of 8 only. And for a company which is used to do 24 crores of PAT on a 330 crore top line, right, without any debt, and it almost had some cash. And whatever cash was left, Anushakti Chemicals as an entity continued to buy Aarti Industries from the open markets. So the whole governance picture changed. But before that, you saw promoters increasing stake in the company. Now, then they did very simple things, what you'll see. So this is basically you go to the next step where you found a company and then you'll see either the price changes or fundamental changes. So out here, we are showing examples of fundamental changes. Going forward, we'll see examples where the prices are changing and you're betting on it. So a lot of things they did, they started doing analyst meets, con calls, and the con calls were pretty detailed. Now, this is the way they kept on buying from the open market. Out here, you'll see every day there would be some buying in 2012. Now, very interesting, they increased 3 to 5% of equity in 2012 to 14. What happens next? Say this increase was happening at 50-60. The promoter sold some shares to a mutual fund at 230 rupees. That's almost like 4x higher than what they initially bought. So that got some. This was the first new mutual fund entry. Now see what has happened to this from this period. So this is the first time the promoter sold. So the stock has gone from 50 to 1100. Now what is happening today, 10 years out, you will see promoters are selling in the open markets and they say we are doing charitable, we are going to do charity. So that is how the whole cycle plays out. And today a large part of the ownership is with mutual funds, etc. But now it is a good company, they've got good orders. So the valuation changes from 6p to 6x sales or more, right? So essentially you just need to find a few companies out here. But this is a period of time where it takes time, right? Where the promoters have been accumulating shares. So we'll take another example. And before I go to the next example, the reason we added technicals to this picture is because the accumulation could continue for 2 years, right? And we may lose patience. So what we've started doing is creating a list of stocks jahan pe insider trading ho raha, and buy them when there is a technical breakout. So that waiting period is reduced and you're participating in the best part of the trend. And the market has also accepted that things are changing in the company or something good is happening. Now, RPG Group was not the best capital allocator. The perception was bad. It was part of the Sensex back in the 90s, CEAT as a company. And for 20 years, it had done nothing. So this is the history. It was at the same price after 20 years. Then what do you see? Promoters between 2010 to 2013 increased stake by almost 5 to 6% from the open markets. Now you'll see one of the things which we notice is when we see odd figure buying, which we'll see later also, you'll see this odd figure buying. Now, how does an odd figure buying happen? That is our assumption kya hai ki aapne order dala buy 15,000 shares at 100 rupees, right? और आपका ऑर्डर ओपन है, जब तक 100 पे माल मिल रहा है, प्रमोटर ने ऑर्डर डाल दिया है, ब्रीडर ने ऑर्डर डाल दिया. Suppose that they got 14,576 shares, so they'll take that much, right? So every day, if there are odd figures selling, buying, there's a chance that it was an open market order, right? It was not an unofficial to official thing. So that is one indication which we see. Now this is the period of time where insider buying continued. The stock did really well from sub 100 rupees. The first QIP came at 890 rupees, right? So the first promoter puts money into the business, buys a large share, goes up to 56%, 55% of the company, does a QIP, he's back to 50% of equity, right? So his stake first increases and then reduces. So no impact on his stake, but at a 8x price.
So he makes a decent profit in between.
So there is no profit, but it's a market cap impact. Say at 1,000 crores market, say 200 crores market cap, you had 50% of the company. Now it is at 1,600 crores market cap. Because you had bought from the open market at 200 crores, even at 1,600 crores, you still own 50% of the company. But now the company has got money to expand from the markets, from QIPs, right? So the next expansion is not funded by the promoter, but by the QIP. Now, there was another company, Hexaware. Now, this is very interesting. This was an interesting case because the PE fund had taken over the company from the erstwhile promoter, right? So they've just got the management control. And as a PE, you've taken up control. Eventually, if you're a private equity owner of a business, your end goal is to what? Sell the company at some point of time, right? So if you've got the management control, you don't want to add more shares. Okay, what is the benefit, right? So if you've taken over the company and you eventually want to sell at 6, 8 years, 9 years, why would you buy more shares of the company, right? But this was interesting. The PE fund kept on buying from the open market, even after the open offer, even after gaining 60% of control. The value of Hexaware, the promoter's PE fund buying into Hexaware was 20% of the trading volumes. So that's a huge participation. Now, this was a stock jo futures may be had at that point of time. The stock used to quote at 6 to 7% yields and maybe sub 10p. So this is where insider buying took place. So that was just an indication from the management boss. the PE fund would be better off putting their money at 7% yield than to put it in somewhere else. And the stock doubled up over the next 6 months. And today, after many years, the company got delisted at a good price. Now, so these are various examples which we have looked at it. Now, the fact is, what we need to do is all this said and done, right? The problem is, jab buying ho rahi hai, right? At that point of time, it could continue for weeks, months together. So you have to understand in context, right? Then you have to look at the fact how desperate the promoter is. Say, for example, the traded volume is 1 lakh shares, right? And the promoters are buying, say, and the delivery volumes is, say, 60,000 shares. And promoters are buying 30,000 shares from the open market. It tells you they're buying 50% of the delivery which is happening on a daily basis, right? So that is desperation. At this price, promoter is ready to buy. So I remember a stock called Unichem Labs back in March 20, right? The promoters were buying 50% of the delivery volumes. Although they did not get a huge percentage of equity, they maybe got less than a percentage of equity or closer to that. But whatever they could buy at a price, they were buying. And the stock was up 30% only because of promoter buying. And then post this buying, the stock was up another 100%, right? So what we decided is that when we saw a lot of these companies in 2011, 12, 13, the problem is accumulation could take a longer time. The promoter. So you have to see buying not in a day's context or in a week's context, but in a period of months and quarters. So how do you go to the next part? When do you buy these companies? Say you buy a company in 2012, the stock does nothing for the next 2 years. How do you hold on to it? Right? Unless you have researched it. So that is the first part where you find companies to research and then you follow them fundamentally. The other way is find companies to research, buy them on technical breakouts. So your universe is smaller. Say on 1,500 companies, you'll see happening in 100 companies. And out of that 10 breakout, you buy on those 10 companies. So that is where we put the next frontier. Basically, given that there is a lot of volatility in small caps, why not add it on the basis of price action? Now, because the promoters are aligned with us as shareholders, it gives you a lot more comfort and conviction to buy breakouts here. Because most of the times in small caps, it is again easier to buy, difficult to sell for an investor too. So now what happens? The same technical reasons, if applied to the whole universe, will have a success ratio of say X. Here the success ratio increases by a big margin. Because these are companies where promoters are also aligned with you.
Active in the company.
Yeah. So what happened is, what we found is the hit ratio is much more higher. The downside risk is relatively lower. So we've rarely seen companies where a large part of equity has been bought by the promoters go down 80%. There will be market cyclical ups and downs, but the hit ratio was much higher. And given the fact that as a technical tool, you have a deeper stop loss here. So your risk reward is superb. So that changes the whole thing. If you go wrong also at a price point, you're out and you're riding the whole move on the upside. So some tips and tricks to look at this. So like I said, delivery volumes of that day. So analyze the promoter buying as a percentage of total delivery volumes on that day, because that indicates at that price how desperate the promoter is. If it is desperate, implies the price is more interesting. Like in case of Hexaware, the promoter is buying 20% of delivery volumes in a heavily traded counter. That tells you the promoters think this price is good. At the same time, there could be a company where promoter is buying 5,000 shares worth 5 lakh rupees on a regular basis. That's not desperation. That is accumulation. But when you see desperation, you want to be more interested in that stock. So it's generally a very strong signal. Then look at odd quantity of buying. The logic is pretty simple. Your orders did not get filled at a particular price point totally. So you ended up with odd lot of shares, right? Now, this is the example I'm talking about. So Unichem Labs promoter bought 70% of delivery volumes, right? Every day there were odd quantities, whatever they could buy. So promoter bought 2 lakh shares, which may not be a large amount, but they were buying all through those few sessions, right? And the stock was also up 20-30% in that period of few days. So that tells you, and at that point of time, the company was available below cash in the company. So, and the whole US business was available for free. So basically it was a cash bargain available to you with an upside. And today what we are listening into the news today, 2 years later, some European, the last news cycle is some European company will take over stake in this company, right? So the stock was 120 rupees at that point of time. Today it is 430 rupees.
तो ये थे नूरेश मेरानी जी। इनके साथ हुए इस एपिसोड में हमने देखा कि कैसे इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग के डेटा को लेकर के आप बहुत ही एक्साइटिंग इन्वेस्टिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज ढूंढ सकते हो। आगे आने वाले एपिसोड में हम देखेंगे कि कैसे प्रैक्टिकली आप ये इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग के डेटा को एक्सेस कर सकते हो और इससे कैसे आप इन्वेस्टिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज ढूंढ सकते हो। सो वी विल लुक एट मेनी मोर एग्जांपल्स इन द कमिंग एपिसोड। सो डू स्टे ट्यून्ड एंड लुक आउट फॉर आवर नेक्स्ट एपिसोड। तब तक के लिए हमारी चैनल को जरूर सब्सक्राइब कीजिए ताकि आप ऐसे ही इंटरेस्टिंग एपिसोड्स आगे भी देख सकें। थैंक यू।
In this case, if you look at Sukhjit Starch, promoter buying here, first indication of a breakout, second clear indication out here at 300, 350, where it has crossed above the 2018 highs, a multi-year breakout. The stock went up from 350 to 600. Right. So this was the point of time.